Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. This week, I want to address something that affects all of us. Whether you drive a GTR, Supra, Evo, 240SX, Mazda Miata, or Honda Civic. Pretty much, if you've been paying attention online or you're part of any car communities, you're aware that something big happened to us in about the last 2-3 weeks. And what that is the EPA has stated that they're now going to start regulating the manufacturer of performance parts. Not just us who buy the parts and install them on our cars, but the people who actually make them. Now I know what you're thinking, how can this be allowed? How is this even legal? In this country that touts freedom and expression, how can the government regulate us so much? And I'm going to discuss that in this video. I'm going to tell you about how they actually can constitutionally do what it is they're doing. I'm going to explain the powers that Congress has that lets them do that, and how the president really has no effect on any of this. So it's not any president's fault, and really we need to start focusing on how Congress runs if we really want to change how this country runs. I'm going to finish up the video by pretty much giving you some ideas and some things you can do to actually help stop this. Is it a guarantee that we can stop this movement from going forward from the EPA? Unfortunately, no. But there are some things that we can do to kind of help stave off what it is that the government's doing, which is pushing us towards electric vehicles. And I'm going to talk about all this in this video. Now, some of you may already know what's going on, and that's great. For those of you who don't, I'm going to break it down for you. Pretty much about 3 weeks ago, a bill took into effect that is affecting the manufacture of car parts and sales. What happened is back in 2019, a memorandum was released by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And it was this long memorandum, and most of it doesn't apply to us. What does, though, is Section 3. In Section 3, it states, Title II of the Clean Air Act authorizes the EPA to set standards applicable to the emissions from a variety of vehicles and engines. Now, this is something we already knew. We've been dealing with this for years, and it's even worse here in California because we have the California Air Resource Board. But like I said, EPA emissions, nothing new to us. We've been dealing with this for a while. What is important is about the middle of the second paragraph. It says the EPA has found numerous companies and individuals that have manufactured and sold both hardware and software specifically designated to defeat required emissions controls on vehicles and engines. This is where they're kind of starting to focus in on who they're going after. Of course, the most important statement is the very last sentence of Section 3, which is the NCI will focus on stopping the manufacture, sale, and installation of these defeat devices. This is where they're going to hit us because they've realized they really can't regulate us. They've tried, and we found ways around their emissions. We all have modified cars. You've seen it all over 1320 where they have like 1,000 horsepower GTRs, Supras, and all this other stuff. So they've decided that since they can't stop us, they're going after manufacturers. And you might be wondering, how can they do that? And it actually has to do with the constitutional powers given to the Congress. I'm going to start with a very quick rundown on how government works. For those of us who haven't been in 6th grade government studies in a while or asleep that day, just to kind of take you through it real quick, usually a law will start in Congress. If it can pass Congress with a 2/3 vote, it goes to the president. The president can either sign the bill saying that he likes it, or he can veto it and it goes back to Congress. If the president signs the bill through, it goes into the Supreme Court. As long as the Supreme Court finds that the law is not unconstitutional, they approve it and boom, we have a law. What's really important to realize during this whole process is just how little the president has an effect on how the country is run. Everyone seems to think that everything is the president's fault no matter which party you're a part of, and they blame the other side. What's real important here is the president has very little power when it comes to the day-to-day running of the country. You don't like how this government's running, pay attention to your Congress. But that aside, getting back to what we're doing, this particular regulation actually didn't even have to go through the president nor the Supreme Court. It actually fell within Congress's power to regulate the country. Now, I know what you might be thinking, doesn't that kind of destroy the whole thing I was talking about? A little bit, but is within the powers granted to the Congress through the Constitution itself. I'm going to start with Congress's power. Now, you might be wondering, how does Congress have the ability to regulate us like this? I mean, don't we have all these constitutionally protected freedoms that give us freedom of speech and freedom of religion? How do we not have the freedom to build race cars? Well, ironically enough, Congress's power to regulate this area actually comes from the Constitution itself. There's two clauses in the Constitution that give them this authority. The first one is the Commerce Clause. The second one is the Necessary and Proper Clause. I'm going to start with the Commerce Clause because in my opinion, that is probably Congress's most powerful weapon in their arsenal when it comes to regulating us. The Commerce Clause is Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. In it, it states that Congress has the authority to regulate commerce among foreign nations and the several states. Now you might be wondering, what does that mean among the several states? Pretty much among the several states means interstate commerce. If anything is sold across state lines, Congress has the ability to regulate it. Not only that, Congress also has the ability to regulate what's called the instrumentalities of interstate commerce, which that's pretty much anything that is used to transport things across state lines like trains, trucks, or even cars, depending on what it is you're selling. For those of us that buy car parts, you're more than aware that usually the parts that we're buying aren't made nor sold in the state that we live. Therefore, car parts fall into the definition of things sold across state lines and are interstate commerce, and under the Commerce Clause, Congress can regulate it. That means that if Congress wants to say, hey, you manufacturer, I don't want you to sell a car part to any engine that was made with the VIN number, Congress can do it. Next is the Necessary and Proper Clause. And what the Necessary and Proper Clause says is that Congress has the authority to enact laws that are necessary and proper to execute their enumerated powers, as long as the law is rationally related to those enumerated powers. Now you might be wondering, what's an enumerated power? Quite simply, an enumerated power is a power that is granted by the Constitution. In this case, as I discussed before, the Commerce Clause is Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Therefore, it is an enumerated power. Therefore, Congress has the ability to enact laws that are rationally related to that power. In this case, rationally related means it has anything to do with that enumerated power. So what that means for us is, because the government has the power to regulate trade among the several states, and car parts, as we've discussed, are part of interstate commerce, Congress can pass laws that are rationally related to that. In that case, what it means is that if the government says, hey, yeah, we don't want you to manufacture performance car parts anymore, and they're sold across state lines, through the Necessary and Proper Clause, it's legal for us to enact that law. So that's where we're sitting. That's how come Congress can regulate the manufacture of car part sales, and that's why we're in the situation we're in now. I know what you're thinking. It's over. We've lost. Congress has won. They have killed car culture, and they've killed racing. No longer are we going to be able to build up those legendary cars that we grew up watching. For example, the Mark IV Supra will no longer allowed to be a 1,000 horsepower beast. It's just going to be a 320 horsepower car that does the quarter mile in 14.5 seconds. No longer are we going to be able to dream about being a pro race car driver when we're not even allowed to build amateur race cars anymore. I mean, how are we supposed to compete competitively when only those people with sponsors are going to be able to afford to buy a car and an engine that were sold without a VIN number to begin with? And what's going to happen to D1 drifting? Who's going to be able to take a 240SX and get enough power to get those rear tires to break traction to actually compete in D1? So you might be thinking at this point, what can I do? What can we do to help save car culture and save racing? Well, there are a few things. First thing is, write letters to your Congress members. Seeing as how Congress has the power to enact these laws, they're the ones you need to contact. And seeing as how they know that we're the ones that vote them in, if enough letters come through, they will pay attention. Also, one of the advantages of Congress is each state has multiple Congress members. So if one member doesn't listen, others might. SEMA, I'm sure is a company that you're more than aware of, has actually realized this and started a program to help us get this done. They've started what they call the RPM Act. If you log on to SEMA's website, they have a form you can fill out. After you fill out the form, it self-propagates an email and sends it to the Congress members from your area. I have already done this myself, and I've already received automated responses from a lot of my Congress members here from LA and California. And what this tells me is the SEMA program is working, Although I'm not necessarily sure the Congress members are paying attention because they're automated responses. But there again, they probably get so many emails a day, it's to be expected. But if they get enough emails from us, they will start paying attention. And this leads into the second thing that we can do, and this is the most powerful thing that we can do as citizens, and that is pay attention to how you vote. We in this country, for some reason, have become so obsessed with the president that we've forgotten the Congress. And as I've shown, the president has absolutely nothing to do with this, nor does he really have anything to do with the day-to-day running of this country. If you don't like the way this country is being run, turn your attention to Congress. They're the ones that have the power and authority to affect how this country works internally. And as a side note, this is my own personal thing, stop paying attention to the little letter that comes after the name. Doesn't matter if it's a D or an R. Pick the best person for the job. It doesn't matter which camp you're a part of. Pay attention to who it is you're voting for and vote for the person that has the same stances on the issues that you have that are important to you. That way you know that they're gonna vote through the bills that are important to you, and they're gonna vote down the ones that you feel negatively impact your life. So unfortunately, this video, not exactly the uppers I typically do, but I hope you did enjoy it. If you did, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button to let me know. It does help the channel out a lot. If you want to see more car content, specifically my GTR in the future, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. You can now follow me on all forms of social media, which include Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and I'll leave links to those in the description down below. If you have any questions or you feel there's anything I missed, go ahead and post in the comments section. I will respond to you. I thank you all for watching, and until next time, forget everything else, focus on the finish line.